Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here, back with another bit of Tug of War Warhammer 2 community gameplay. Now this time around it is going to be a Brettonia versus Beastmen matchup on the map MP Alpine Ridge in a game that was submitted to me by Luca, or Triarii as he goes by. And this is going to be a bit of a fun one because this is quite the mixed bag of Brettonian units that we're seeing. And actually, it's a non-summon build from the Beastmen, so I kind of think that's a double whammy of some niceness there. Now, going off of the Brettonian build here, we do actually see a Prophetess of Beasts, which I guess that's kind of summoning. That's definitely, not kind of, definitely summoning there. So Brettonia going for the summoning build. Bring in Transformation of Kadon, of course, for that Manticore spam. Very powerful against Beastmen, who don't have a lot of armor on any of their units, besides Bestigors and Gorbles. So Manticore can usually find some value there, and actual damage, not just disruption. Flock of Doom, very good for dealing with mobs of infantry. Wild Heart for those extra bits of Winds of Magic, just to get a few more Flocks of Doom out. Arcane Conduit, and then Assault of Stone, the bound ability for the Prophetess, which is definitely very nifty if you need to nuke a blob of enemy infantry. Besides that, she does have the Aura of the Lady, which I think is kind of a waste. Not sure if that was a mistake or if there was some specific reason Luca chose to run that. But Aura of the Lady, it isn't really valuable in my opinion. It doesn't protect you from one-shotting by Spirit Leech, I believe. Maybe it does with Grail Guardians. I'm not entirely sure because Grail Guardians have higher HP per model. It's something I'd have to check. But I don't think it's usually worth it, just because it doesn't protect against Spirit Leech, and most Beastmen units don't have magic damage. Now, besides that, we do have a very mixed cavalry bag. We've got Grail Guardians here. We've got Royal Hippogriff Knights as well as Royal Pegasus Knights up here. Now, Grail Guardians, excellent against Beastmen. They can really grind them down over time. They're very difficult for the Beastmen to deal with just because they have such monstrous combat stats. Royal Hippogriff Knights, not terrible in the matchup. Them and the Pegasus Knights are really good for avoiding Cygors. If your opponent goes for a Cygor heavy build, they can survive pretty well. They can juke the shots, and both of them can do a lot of damage to Beastmen troops, especially if you can isolate them, separate them, that sort of thing. The front line is composed entirely of peasant mobs. Not much to be said for them. They're just there to soak up some charges, soak up some ammo perhaps, maybe take a Cygor shot or something, depending on what the Beastman player had brought. Not much else for them to do. Besides that, we do have some Battle Pilgrims as a main line. Definitely not a bad choice. Occasionally you'll see heavy Bestigor play from the Beastmen, in which case these guys get mulched, but against everything else, Beastmen bring pretty solid units. Holy Wardens especially can do absolute work against really the vast majority of the Beastmen roster. And once again, keep in mind, Beastmen large stuff has very light armor, so generally, even if they throw some cavalry in the fight, or even if they throw some Minotaurs in the fight, even Razor Gores, units like that, Battle Pilgrims will hit somewhat hard in return. On the flanks here, we do have two Mounted Yeoman Archers, one of them the Regiment Renowned Wardens of Montfort. I think a bit of an overpriced unit, but these guys can kind of chip away at key Beastmen targets. Finally, the Green Knight, Gilles Le Breton, coming in to save his people, riding through the woods here, hidden from sight, and looking to get that flank. And this guy's an absolute beast against the Beastmen if utilized correctly, protected from these few counters, because Beastmen don't have much to bring him down. They've got Spirit Leech, and they've got the Sons of Gorus. That's basically all their magic damage right there. Now, for the Beastman player, he has decided to camp in the woods here, perhaps wanting to see what the Brettonian had brought first before sort of committing to an engagement. For his Lord Morgar, no surprise there. Morgar's standard. He's got full kit. He's got the double summons. Very tanky Lord. Provides some good support. Can really bog down cavalry with the summons. Alongside him, Brave Shaman of Shadows, he is on foot, somewhat surprisingly. Usually you see him on a chariot in my experience. He's got Penumbral Pendulum and Melkot's Miasma. No Enfeebling Foe, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. I think when you're going with the melee heavy build here with Minotaurs with Grey Weapons, with Korok's Man Rippers, you really do want that benefit of Enfeebling Foe, so you can quickly melt an elite unit like Royal Hippogriff Knights, like Royal Pegasus Knights, like Grail Guardians, because otherwise it will be very, very difficult. Now, granted, there is no healing here for Brettonia, so it's not going to be that tough, but still, you want to be able to, you still want to be able to get that burst of damage in. Says that the Razor Gore herd out here on the flank, hustling back to their formation. Quite a significant cavalry contingent for the Beastmen. Some Centaurs out here, Centaurs with throwing axes. Not a bad choice. Centaurs, I think, are a bit iffy. They don't trade well into any Brettonian cav except Mounted Yeomen, and obviously Mounted Yeomen are kind of craps. You're not going to see those in this matchup. I think it's probably better to go for Centaurs with Grey Weapons if you're going to bring any of them. But as a screening force, to perhaps harass Peasant Bows, they're not terrible. Finally, there is an infantry contingent here. Ungor Spears, some Ungors, the Destroyers of Drakkwald, and some Gors. Just a bit of a motley assortment with some Ungor Raider support here. But a lot of anti-large in there. And keep in mind, Pegasus Knights, not the best armor. In fact, even Royal Hippogriffs only have 90, but obviously Grail Guardians are insane. They've got 120. But if I can find them, the Pegasus Knights do have a mere 80 armor, so not the tankiest. Even though they do have that 20% physical resist. Now over here we're going to see some Centaurs plowing into the poor peasant mob, crushing them very quickly. Obviously the peasants are not built to sustain against this, but keep in mind the peasants will actually hit back here a little bit. This is all damage for peasants. Already these guys have taken, like, I don't know, 400, 500 or so damage just from peasants, which shows how that low armor can really hurt the Beastmen. They're just getting dragged down there by the peasants. Now the archery fire coming in on the Centaurs with throwing axes. We're trying to get some chip damage here. Honestly, these guys should hang back. I think this is a big misplay on the part of the Beastmen player, trying to get in here. Hippogriffs are going to dive into these Centaurs, start disrupting them very badly. Keep in mind, Centaurs do have their ability here. The Primal Fury that they've got is only active as long as it's essentially frenzy. It's only active as long as their leadership is above 50%. So if that leadership drops below 50%, they slow down immensely. They drop to 84 speed. That makes them a much easier target for units like Royal Hippogriffs, for units like Grail Guardians, for units like that to bash their face in. Over here, Royal Pegasus Knights taking advantage of their monstrous 110 speed. This is one of those beautiful things with them against Beastmen, is just how easily they can catch all Beastmen units and immediately trash these guys. And it's going to be a bit of a Centaur sandwich here, because in come the Royal Hippogriffs, soaring on those majestic wings, plowing into these poor Centaurs with their throwing hatchets and their spears. They really can't hold up against the might of Brettonian aerial supremacy here, and they are forced to run like hell, run for the hills. In the meantime, mounted yeomen back there skirmishing. We do see the Ungor spears engaging, but they're getting mucked up here by the peasants, and this is a big misplay. This is a massive blob here, immediately punished by a flock of doom. So big misplay there. Unfortunately though for Brettonia, here the Razor Gores are going to commit, crush that peasant mob pretty quickly. But good play here from Luca, committing the Grail Guardians to bog these guys down, preventing them from getting a clean charge on the Battle Pilgrims, and then kind of counter-charging them, crushing these guys quickly. Anytime over here, kind of a pocket of Beastmen who are not engaging. They really need to be in that fight. We do see Assault of Stone going down, and I think this was a bit of a mistargeted Assault of Stone, because it missed the majority of the Beastmen force. I think you really wanted to just focus on these Koroks Man-Rippers. They are one of the key threats, key targets for the Brettonian players to take out, in my opinion. If these guys can stick around to late game in decent shape, they will be a monster to deal with for everything except Royal Hippogriffs, really. They'll take forever. Even for the Green Knight, he can't really cleave through them quickly, so it's going to be tough. And I think trying to focus them with that Assault of Stone instead of trying to get a bit of a greedy Assault of Stone on those Ungor spears would have probably been better. Now, Manticore Summon is going down here as the Battle Pilgrims munch through those Ungor spears. Over here, Mounted Yeoman getting intercepted by the Centaurs, but of course the Royal Pegasus mob is coming in. These guys still have the majority of their models just diving through, getting on top of the Centaurs. Well, back here, the Beastmen committing a massive amount of resources to shut down this Green Knight, and just a massive misplay here. Green Knight is valuable, but not that valuable. He costs 2,000 gold. He is currently bogging down in excess of like 4,000 gold in troops here. And this is just a huge misplay. The caster is out of the fight. He's not helping over here where he really needs to be helping. And because of that, these Koroks Man-Rippers are just getting pounded upon. The Green Knight, yeah, he's dying here. He's losing his HP quickly, but it's just not that worth it. Now, Minotaurs are going to get dove upon here by the Manticore. It's going to do some good damage. It's already got 11 kills there. In come the Royal Hippogriffs here, looking to free the Green Knight. Obviously, Luca does not want to lose the Green Knight prematurely if he can avoid it. And if you can get the Green Knight out of here, even though he hasn't brought healing, he does still have the Sacred Guardian, which will allow him to regen HP. Now, a little bit of a misplay here on the Brettonian part, I think. Diving in the Pegasus Knights in from the front. In my opinion, you could easily go for a nice little recharge here. Try to drop the Beastmen leadership more. At least try to break off this Ungor herd. Break off these Ungor Raiders. Isolate those Minotaurs. Separate them from their support. I think that would be a big win there. Meantime, Grail Guardians over here running amok in the back lines, looking to commit into the back of these Beastmen. I'm actually pivoting away. We're going to clean up these fleeing Gores. And Grails will obviously have an excellent time against Gore Herd in the protracted fight. Obviously, they won't shock through them because their charge bonus is pretty low, but they'll crush them pretty good. Over here, Green Knight is coming into support. He still has 300 HP, and once he's fighting and he's not really isolated, and once he's fighting a sort of mob of trash infantry, he's going to heal very quickly, and he's going to be sort of safe from damage. Over here, though, things not looking as bright and cheery for Brettonia. Royal Hippogriffs forced to run down to 5 models. Royal Pegs pulling back to engage over here on the Centaurs, and sort of trying to help deal with these Ungor spears, and they'll be able to clean them up. But they took a pounding and they can't heal. Keep in mind, the Brettonian build here does not have a healer. You've only got the Prophetess of Beasts. And the Minotaurs are still in decent shape. These Minotaurs here, 10 models. These Minotaurs here are sitting at 10. They actually get in on the Mounted Yeoman, which is a big slip up there, allowing relatively slow Minotaurs to get in on them like that. But the Mounted Yeoman do flee before they take too much damage and escape. and they're now going to be able to whittle those Minotaurs down. But the thing is, now they're almost out of ammo. Wardens of Montfort hitting rock bottom. Mounted Movement Archers here down to just 3 rounds, 3 volleys. Fortunately, these Minotaurs overextending a bit. Going to get dove upon here by the Pegs, and the Pegs are going to take advantage of that very good charge bonus of 65, that bonus versus large, and the fact these guys have no armor to try to crush this isolated unit of Minotaurs. And right now, actually, balance of power is still dead even, and I think that this is one big opportunity Brettonia has to pull ahead if they can get rid of these Minotaurs. Now, with the crumbling of that Chaos Spawn, Brettonia is going to surge back, as well as getting rid of these Minotaurs. So that was a huge pickup there, because if these Minotaurs were still together on top of these Koroks Man-Rippers and okay HP, this could be a rather grim sight. Now, the Wardens of Montfort here committing just to bog down this blob of troops, prevent them from getting in on the Flyers. These Flyers starting to bleed pretty heavily, losing that HP. While over here, the Prophet is sort of backing off. I think perhaps she could have been used to chase off some of these Ungors when they broke, instead of letting them rally. Battle Pilgrims, though, mulching those destroyers. The Grail Guardians doing some cleanup in Isle 9. And a Green Knight here, back up to 500 HP. He's recovered about 200 HP in that peripheral fight. And another Manticore coming down. And now Bounce Power swing pretty decisively in Brettonia's favor. Now, this, I think, is a little bit of a greedy play, committing with the Pegasus Knights here with no support. The Green Knight is coming in, as is the Manticore, but it's definitely risky. Especially with the Koroks Man-Rippers in here, they can do a lot of damage very quickly to Pegasus Knights. These guys already gained 2 chevrons, which is nuts, on their way to gaining a 3rd. They started with 1, so really well done there. On the periphery there, Prophet is a Beast kind of riding around, just looking at these Beastmen getting torn apart. But these Pegasus Knights not having the best time of it. They are getting dragged down into the muck by the Koroks Man-Rippers, but I do think at this point it's simply a matter of time before Beastmen buckles. Green Knight is going to dive in here, help clean up these Ungors. Morgar is doing his best here. I think Morgar is really the only thing propping up leadership at this point for the Beastmen. But Bounce Power swings decisively out of the Beastmen's favor. And it's going to be GG there now. Definitely some unconventional builds from both sides. You don't see the Prophetess all that often, first and foremost. And you don't see this sort of mixed bag of Flyers and Ground Cav and Mounted Yeomen, in my opinion, all that often against Beastmen either. Now, you will often see one or the other, but usually Brettonia commits to a path and stays that way. So I thought this was a pretty cool idea. My main critique is that you've got no healing for all this Elite Cav. So if your opponent went with, say, a Spirit Leech heavy build and just kind of tried to kite you out, or brought a Cygor and starts nailing these Grail Guardians, you're not, obviously, I guess you lose models at that point. But the splash damage still adds up, I should note. And if they're whittling you down with summons, that sort of thing. Honestly, the Spirit Leech against units like Royal Pegasus Knights, it won't kill models. It won't kill models on Royal Hippogriffs, but it will whittle them down an immense amount. And you've got no way of recovering that. If you're dealing with an Eye of Morsley, you get snared, you lose a lot of HP, you can't bring it back. So I think perhaps not bring any healing for this many elites might have been a little bit of a mistake, but obviously in this situation it just didn't matter. And Luke had some really good plays, I thought, with his flying force. Getting some beautiful early game isolations on those Centaurs, really exploiting their weaknesses and mistakes there through the superior mobility of the Royal Pegasus Knights, using Grail Guardians to really clean up that infantry, and the Green Knight just getting thrown into the grinder against a horde of devastating anti-large. The Minotaurs with great weapons, the Koroks Man-Rippers, and Morgar himself all in there, and the Green Knight just bogged them down for ages while the cavalry just range shop on the rest of the Beastmen force. Only real miss I could think of, perhaps, is the use of the Assault of Stone. I think it could have been better utilized on just focusing on the Koroks Man-Rippers. I think they were one of the biggest threats here. Really, if I looked at this Beastman army, I actually think my number one priority target would be the Koroks Man-Rippers, because Minotaurs with great weapons can be beaten down by Grail Guardians and Royal Pegasus Knights much more effectively, whereas something like the Koroks Man-Rippers can, especially against units that tend to get snagged, like Royal Pegasus Knights, and as long as you have a few summons from like Morgar, they can do quite a bit of damage to heavy cavalry. They're actually kind of difficult to shut down. I do think for the Beastmen player, the build obviously a little bit off meta. There's no summons here, no Cygor, both of which are very common picks. I do think going with Centaurs is a little bit of a mistake. Centaurs don't have, in my opinion, a huge niche in this matchup. There's not much they do well against Brettonia. They do not counter any of their cavalry, really. They won't catch Mounted Yeomen efficiently. They absolutely don't counter any of their heavy cav. So if you just want to harass the unit and keep it pinned to the ground, I think you're better off with hounds, especially poison hounds. And if you're looking to actually counteract your opponent's cavalry, I think great weapons are a better option, or more throwing axes. You could probably cut an Ungor spear here, get a unit of Centigors with throwing axes, or instead of one of these Centigors, then replace the other one with like a unit of poison hounds, or two units of poison hounds there, and you'd probably be in a stronger position. Or maybe if you to counteract the Green Knight, you could cut one of these Centigors and a Ungor spear, get the Sons of Goros on the field. The lack of magic damage with the Green Knight being a potential threat, and in this situation being a threat, I think was a big problem. As far as actual gameplay, I do think there were a few slip-ups early on. The sort of cheeky charges there with the Centigors and the Centigor throwing axes kind of ended up backfiring a huge amount. The Centigors just got isolated and torn to shreds. The Minotaurs never really got into that fight to help. The Centigors throwing axes got basically no value. They just threw their axes at peasant mobs and then got annihilated by royal pegs and hippogriffs. So that was just brutal. And I think that later in the game, the Minotaur unit that broke off from the main fight was definitely a bit of an issue there. It needed to stay tight with the main force. If you had 2 Minotaurs on top of the Gorok's Manrippers in the end game, I think the Beastmen Drunken Coward here might have been able to keep things together a little bit better. But because Triarii was able to get that beautiful cycle sort of rear charge combined with the support from the Mounted Yeomen on that isolated Yeoman Minotaurs, it really swung things. But regardless, well played to both players. A fun little submission here, and always cool to see these units take the field. Grail Guardians and Royal Pegasus Knights, you don't see them all that often. Really, Green Knight, you don't see them that often. Prophetess, all fairly uncommon units, so very cool to see. Definitely appreciate the replay. Big thanks to Triarii. Hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you would like to see more of this style, feel free to submit your replays down to wyverngamingreplays@gmail.com. I'll leave the link in the description below. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.